Hello, it's Joni, and I'm here today to give you my pick for Stephen King's top 5 scariest novels. Some of his collections are fantastic and frightening, but it's too hard to rate. How do you give weighted ratings or scary ratings to each individual story? I don't know. That's too hard, and obviously nonfiction is in the same kind of scary. So I've read 2/3 of his novels, so this list could change in the future having read new books, or just upon rereads, or just, my opinions changing in the future. It could change in the future, but I read, like I said, 2/3, a good portion of his stuff, and I think I've read most of them that I've heard on other people's lists, so yeah. Anyway, if you like videos like this, these top fives, either Stephen King related or genre related or whatever, and you have any suggestions for me or any requests, let me know. I really like this kind of video. It's the kind of thing that I seek out the most on BookTube, and this kind of stuff is really why I started making videos to begin with. Specifically Stephen King, there wasn't as much Stephen King video content when I first started making videos. But yeah, this is how I like to find new books, is finding a genre or a niche that I really like and searching out those videos. Anyway, I also just think they're fun. So if you have any suggestions or requests, please let me know. I do have some other stuff planned, but I would always appreciate some new input if you have any for me. So I'm going to get started. This time I am actually counting down from 5th to most scary in my opinion. And number 5 is one that is one of his least appreciated, his least liked books, probably not one you would think of for this list, and it's really not as stereotypically frightening as a lot of his other stuff, but it's one that I read a year and a half ago now, and it still sticks with me. That is Rose Matter. This is about a woman who is in an extraordinarily abusive relationship. Her husband is a police officer with all sorts of means to find her, to keep her from being able to report any of this kind of stuff. And at the beginning of the book, she decides to leave him. So a lot of this, you get some of the abuse, you get some of her trying to figure out what to do in that situation, and then her being involved in a women's shelter and just a group of other people in similar situations, and the crazy evil ass vindictive stuff that her husband does, just getting a little bit of his mindset, is just so over the top, and it's such a real horror that exists in the world, and it's so just awful. I wasn't super on the edge of my seat with this one, or super biting my nails necessarily the whole time, but it just was a horror that sank deep with me and stuck with me. Like I said, 17 months after I read this, it still crosses my mind once in a while. Anyway, this is my pick for his 5th most frightening book. Number 4 is another one that I think I read last year that is much more common on these lists. That's Pet Sematary. And again, this one has just some real life horror, but it does what I think a good horror book, for me, my favorite thing in a horror book, kind of mixes that real life, just situations that are just awful, that can put you in a mindset that you're not going to think through things clearly. You might invite bad situations. In this, it involves the loss of a child, which is just so awful, and then mixes it with some of that crazy supernatural paranormal stuff that's just over the top insane. This one is a horror book through and through. It builds some things, from beginning to end, and then it doesn't have a cookie cutter, nice, neat, cozy ending. It carries that horror through to the end. You watch the main character, this father and husband, go through some horrific things and do some things that you don't want to fault him for, because in that situation, what would you do? But at the same time, I can't believe you're doing this. Yeah, this one, it had some good atmosphere, some just wonderfully horrific components to it, and I really enjoyed this for the scare factor especially. My number 3 pick is a super, super recent read for me, and it's one that I didn't think was a perfect book, but oh man, it has some atmosphere to it. That is Bag of Bones. Again, this one deals with grief and loss. It follows a main character who has lost his wife at the very beginning of the book. Overall, it's a ghost story, and it again includes some of those real life elements, not just with the loss of his wife, but with some other, I don't want to spoil things, with some other people. A lot more of that just real life situations that are horrifying. But the atmosphere in this, holy cow! The haunted house, the little things going on in the house. I do have a little bit of that water phobia and a basement phobia, and this especially with the water did a really good job. So it might be a little bit more catered to people like that who have a little bit of that fear. But that wasn't the only thing. Haunted house atmospheres tend to work for me, so maybe if they don't for you, this wouldn't be as high on your list, but it's hard for me to even pinpoint what exactly did it without like pointing out, oh, I have a little bit of a fear of water, and there was a lot of play with that in this. But considering I didn't like over the moon connect with some of the characters as well as I'd have liked, the fact that this got to me so much just says something for how it's done. It's just done incredibly well. I know it's not been that long, but I can still remember so many nights of reading this, and like between putting the book down, turning off the light, and getting to bed, just like having that little like buildup of fear that I remember from being a 8-year-old and watching a scary movie and then having to go to bed after. Just that little like fear that gets to you. Anyway, yes, this is my number 3 pick for Stephen King's Scariest. And number 2 is a super obvious one, but it's obvious for a reason. That is It. Trying to find an angle that doesn't give you too much glare. So obviously with this one you have that crazy entity that turns into whatever you're most terrified of, and it has so many different situations. Chances are unless you never have any fear of anything at all, it'll touch on at least something that you've had some kind of fear of at some point. But more than that, the overall atmosphere and the idea of being one of these kids and knowing that none of the adults around you see what's going on or will recognize it when they see it, and watching your friends, your classmates, your fellow kids in your area getting killed or getting just horrified and tormented, and knowing that your turn is coming, or like being in denial about your turn coming, this one did wonders. Also, like I mentioned, water in basements kind of creep me out. The whole sewer component of this clearly did it for me as far as being frightened. But this hits so many different buttons. I feel like it would be hard to not hit at least one of them for most readers. Finally, my number 1 pick for Stephen King's scariest books is The Shining. I know if you've just seen the movie adaptation, Stanley Kubrick's, or even the made-for-TV one, movie adaptations of books I don't think ever usually, unless they kind of go their own route, quite capture terror as well as a book can. I think movies can be horrifying, just not in the same way, and trying to adapt something isn't the same. Kubrick did go a different route, but it has its scary moments. It's one of those that I think it would be hard for me to judge because I've seen it so many times, and since such a young age, it's something that's just like part of my my point of reference for everything else. And I think it's slow enough that a lot of newer viewers wouldn't find it as frightening as maybe people used to. I don't know. I still think it's fantastic. But this is just different. But this is just different than the movie experience, I think. So you have that background of Jack Torrance being potentially abusive, potentially alcoholic, and then the isolation of this family in what you quickly find out before they're even isolated there is a haunted hotel. The component of Danny and Jack's to a lesser degree sort of like connection or like the ghosts being drawn to them because of their abilities. So you have this great setup, but then also these other more subtle setups, like the boiler thing. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but there's something wrong with it, and he has to like take some off each day, whatever. And if that doesn't happen, you know that the boiler can explode. And as you watch his mental state deteriorate, that's kind of like in the back of your mind the whole time that that's going on. But at the same time, so many just horrifying, crazy scenes. I never would have thought hedge animals could be frightening, but wow, they creep the crap out of me after this. And just so many other things. The lady in the bathtub, just the radio telling Jack to kill his family. So many different things. Just throughout the isolation and the slow deterioration of mental state, in addition to the ghosts like going after Danny. This is just insane. I can't imagine anything ever topping this. This is probably the most frightening book I've ever read, which is helped by the fact that I did connect to the characters really well in this. So I really felt for them. You get enough background of not just the main 3 characters, but some side characters to kind of make you feel for them even more. I absolutely love this book, and I think it's horrifying. If you haven't read it yet and that sounds like your cup of tea, you should definitely check it out. Anyway, those are my picks for Stephen King's top 5 scariest. Like I said, this could change in the future. Maybe I'll do an updated one later. As it is, I have a lot of other similar ideas. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Bye.